But you're telling me that $2 billion in the same country that I'm sure some of y'all would struggle with whether or not the enslavement of black people was good or bad. I'm not even gonna go there and ask y'all the question because y'all struggled with defining that these people were white supremacists. But this country still hasn't thought that reparations made sense for black folk in this country. But at the same time, they've decided that people that are in organizations that are absolutely white supremacy organizations should get our tax dollars.
So what happens when politics becomes more than policy? What happens when loyalty becomes identity? When people defend a leader at the cost of friendships, families, even facts? In today's episode of Race, Religion, Racism, we're not just talking about Donald Trump. We're talking about power, loyalty, race, perception, and the America being built right in front of us.
The MAGA cult doesn't blame themselves for Trump. They blame you. There's a psychological reason for that. Psychologist Leon Festinger documented what happens when people make a choice that ends up hurting them. The brain cannot admit the mistake, so it finds someone else to blame, and that person is you. He called it dissidence-induced blame shifting. Gas prices went up, they blame Biden. Tariffs are killing small businesses, they blame the media. Their retirement accounts are collapsing, they blame the deep state. They never blame themselves or Trump. Here's why. Most normal people can admit when they're wrong about voting for a bad politician, because the politician was just a choice they made. For Trump supporters, it went further than that. Voting for Trump wasn't just a decision. It becomes who they are, their identity, everything they told their family and friends they stood for, everyone they fought with, everyone that doesn't talk to them anymore. Admitting Trump was a catastrophic mistake doesn't just mean they were wrong about one decision. It means they were wrong about themselves. Their brain will never allow that because they are weak people. So instead of looking inward, their brain looks outward for a target to blame, and that target is you. They're not angry because you're wrong. They're angry at you because you keep pointing out the damage Trump is causing. And the damage proves they did this, that it's their fault, and they cannot take accountability. And right now, everyone else is paying for their horrible decision, and they know accountability is right around the corner.
I've had plenty of friends, several, who pretty much disconnected from me because I didn't fall in line. But here's the thing with me. When Trump first came out, I tried to give him the benefit of a doubt. I did. I tried to give him the benefit of a doubt, unlike others who immediately, went straight for the jugular. But I gave him the benefit of a doubt, and over time, he proved me wrong. My thing is, as a man, not the politics, because the politics that comes and go. What I look at is the human, the man. How does he stand up? How are his morals? And his morals are crap. His morals are less to be desired. So I can't rock with a president like that. Now, because I'm military, I still give honor and respect to those in office. That's just me. That's just the way I was taught. But at the same time, if you're wrong, and I will call you out.
Could send nearly $2 billion in taxpayer dollars to allies and supporters of President Trump who claim they were unfairly targeted by the Justice Department. At the same time, the president has agreed to drop his $10 billion lawsuit against the IRS. Nancy Cordes explains from the White House.
Could some of the rioters convicted of storming the Capitol 5 years ago now get taxpayer-funded payouts? That's what President Trump is suggesting.
These were people that were weaponized and really treated brutally.
Now, did you pay attention to what he said? They were weaponized and treated brutally. Now, he's talking about the insurrectors.
The Department of Justice says the new $1.8 billion fund is designed to provide monetary relief to those who suffered weaponization and lawfare at the hands of the Biden administration. Democrats argue that's code for the roughly 1,500 people who were convicted for their roles in the January 6th Capitol riot.
The people who committed this, they committed a crime. He's pardoned them, and now he wants to pay them.
They note that Republicans were also in danger that day.
They're going to let him pay off people that were chasing them through the Capitol. Is breathtaking.
DOJ says the payouts will be determined by a commission of 5 members appointed by the Attorney General, a role currently held by Todd Blanche, Trump's former personal attorney.
The thing I think the administration is going to need to focus on, to build in guardrails to ensure that this judgment fund is administered with independence, with integrity, not used as a political slush fund, but it's given money to people who deserve it.
I asked President Trump last night who he thinks deserves it.
Do you believe that people who committed violence against Capitol Hill police officers on January 6th should be eligible for compensation from this DOJ fund?
I do believe there has to be compensation for people that were destroyed. You have families absolutely destroyed, and it's all going to be determined by a committee of 4 or 5 people that are respected and very brilliant at what they do.
So let me understand this. Thugs and criminals will get paid, whereas we as Black Americans are still looking for reparations, even though other ethnic groups, immigrants, have gotten reparations. But we are still waiting for that. Make it make sense.
I also asked the president if he or any of his family members are going to be seeking compensation from this fund, because he has long argued that he was a victim of government weaponization himself. He didn't say either way, adding that he only found out about the existence of this fund on Sunday.
Show of strength for President Trump and the Republican Party he is clearly remaking in his own image. One of his frequent critics, Congressman Thomas Massie, lost his GOP primary in Kentucky to former Navy SEAL Ed Galrine, a candidate very aggressively backed by the president. Ed O'Keefe is in Kentucky with more on this and other interesting primaries of last night. Ed, good morning.
Major, good to see you. As you know, more than $32 million was spent on this primary by groups aligned with the president, but also organizations that support Israel have been trying to defeat the congressman for years because of his opposition to aid to Israel. But ultimately, this contest is just the latest reminder. If you're a Republican who crosses President Trump, you will pay the political consequences.
Welcome to the most expensive congressional primary ever.
Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie, the latest in a long line of Republicans defeated after falling out of favor with President Trump. In his concession speech, Massie made a pointed jab at his opponent.
I would have come out sooner, but I had to call my opponent and concede, and it took a while to find Ed Galrine in Tel Aviv.
After more than $32 million spent by pro-Israel organizations and Trump-backed groups helped power Ed Galrine's campaign.
There is a yearning in this country for somebody who will vote for principles over party.
Massie and Trump disagreed on the war with Iran, the Jeffrey Epstein affair, and foreign aid to Israel and Ukraine. He lost to farmer and former Navy SEAL Galrine, who vows to be a reliable yes vote for Trump.
I want to thank President Trump for
his endorsement. The president, who encouraged those outside groups to spend all that money, showed no mercy.
He was a bad guy. He deserves them.
In Georgia, another one-time Trump foe went down as Brad Raffensperger lost his Republican bid for governor. The state's top election official famously defied Trump's demand in 2020 to find enough votes to help him win the key swing state. And even before last night's results, the president jumped into the next big contest, a Texas-sized Republican runoff between Senator John Cornyn and Ken Paxton, the state attorney general. Paxton's faced years of investigations and impeachment attempts over corruption allegations that he denies. Many Republicans fear his controversial record could lose the GOP a seat they've held for more than 3 decades. But Trump says he's endorsing Paxton because he's always been extremely loyal to me.
That says it all right there. Trump said, as long as you're extremely loyal to him, everything's cool. Doesn't matter if this guy is corrupt, but then again, Trump is corrupt. But doesn't that say something about the morality of those who continue to back Trump? I'm just saying. Think about it.
There are concerns across the GOP that they're now going to have to spend tens of millions of dollars to help Paxton defeat Democrat James Tallarico when they could have spent that money in easier to win, less expensive Senate contests in states like North Carolina, Georgia, and Maine. Adriana, all this a reminder. It's going to be a very expensive campaign year.
Is backlash on both sides of the political aisle to the Justice Department's plan to create a nearly $1.8 billion fund for the president's allies. And now the Justice Department says the settlement includes a deal that would keep the government from, quote, prosecuting or pursuing any claims against the president, his family, or their businesses over past tax returns. Meanwhile, the president is offering a new explanation for the $1 billion in extra costs for his new ballroom. Nancy Cordes is at the White House tracking it all. Nancy, good morning.
Good morning, Adriana. President Trump is coming under scrutiny, even from some Republicans, over a few of these expensive new projects, and starting with that ballroom. So he took reporters to see it on Tuesday and tried to make the case that it is vital to the security of this city.
So all of this was paid for by myself.
Pointing to the pit where his ballroom is going up, President Trump insisted the project is meant to benefit future presidents and the country.
This is a gift. This is not going to be paid for by the taxpayer.
But Senate Republicans, with his blessing, are still pushing for $1 billion in taxpayer money to go towards security features. Trump said the ballroom will be, quote, the safest building ever built.
The safest building ever built? Shouldn't that be the White House instead of a ballroom? Oh, boy.
Between the drone proofing, the missile proofing.
He argued the ballroom will protect a planned military hospital and research facilities located below. Trump also said he had been just an hour away from attacking Iran again this week before he pulled back to pursue diplomacy. He said the pain Americans are feeling at the pump right now is nothing compared to the prospect of a nuclear Iran.
And this is peanuts, and I appreciate everybody putting up with it for a little while.
People have been putting up with it for 11 weeks, twice as long as the president predicted the war would last. Bipartisan backlash is also growing over the nearly $1.8 billion the Justice Department set aside this week to pay people who feel they were unfairly prosecuted by the government. It's part of a government settlement with Trump that also now blocks all future IRS investigations into his past tax returns.
There are and will be, continue to be, a lot of questions around that.
We're already seeing the first public request for money from that fund. It comes from first-term Trump administration official Michael Caputo, who said that his family suffered greatly from a Biden-era investigation into Russian interference. Now, Caputo was never charged with any crime, but he's still seeking $2.7 million in restitution.
The Trump administration's decision to set up a nearly $1.8 billion fund that could give January 6th rioters payouts from taxpayer-provided money. Two police officers who were injured that day are now suing to stop all this. Ed O'Keefe is at the White House. Ed, good morning. A lot of questions.
Major, that's right. As bipartisan backlash grows, Senate Republicans may now try to put guardrails on that new government anti-weaponization fund. But President Trump insists the payouts are, quote, peanuts compared to what some of his supporters suffered.
It was the most violent thing I've ever seen in politics, what they did.
President Trump isn't talking about this violent assault on the Capitol on January 6th. But what happened to some of his supporters afterwards, including those convicted of assaulting police officers like Daniel Hodges, pinned in a door, screaming in pain.
There's no reason that the government should be giving these people money.
Hodges and Harry Dunn, two of more than 100 officers injured that day, now are suing to block taxpayer-funded payouts for people convicted of attacking police.
It's just that they committed crimes and they recorded themselves doing these crimes, so then they face the consequences right up until Trump pardoned them.
But the president defended the nearly $1.8 billion fund to pay people who alleged they were victims of government weaponization, like former Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio, convicted of seditious conspiracy in connection with the January 6th riot. He told Reuters, "I'm not greedy, but thinks he could get $2 to $5 million from the fund."
People were destroyed. They went to jail. Their families were ruined.
What critics call a slush fund is part of the president's settlement with the Justice Department in his $10 billion lawsuit against the IRS over his leaked tax returns. Republican Senator Bill Cassidy, who launched a primary last weekend after failing to win Trump's endorsement, warned the new fund will allow the president and his allies to pay whomever they wish, with no legal precedent or accountability.
These people, they should not be rewarded by the government for their attempt to overthrow the government.
But legal experts say the police officers are unlikely to succeed in blocking the fund in court because their claim may not meet the legal threshold for bringing a lawsuit. CBS News has reached out to the Justice Department for comment on the lawsuit and has yet to hear back.
Secretary McMahon, you've claimed that you want to drastically reduce the already very small federal role in education, and also that you will not cut Title I-A funding. That is still your position, correct? So let's talk about so-called illegal DEI, as you all have called it, a phrase you've continually bring up, that I'm still unclear on, especially after 3 federal judges have preliminarily ruled that your illegal DEI guidance is likely unconstitutional and unenforceable, illegal, as it were. Secretary McMahon, during your confirmation hearing, you were asked by Senator Chris Murphy if an African-American history class violated the administration's position on diversity, equity, and inclusion. You said you'd like to look into it. You've been on the job for a few months now. Have you been able to look into it?
I do not think that African studies or Middle East studies or Chinese studies are part of DEI if they are taught as part of the total history package. So that if you're giving the facts on both sides, of course they're not DEI.
I don't know what both sides of African-American history would be.
What's up, everybody? Major Retired Richard Ojeda here, and Representative Summer Lee just folded Secretary of Education Linda McMahon like a cheap suit and tossed her out of the ring like it was Royal Rumble night. Summer hit her with the truth, and Linda tapped out before the bell.
Would you say that it would be an illegal DEI for a lesson plan on the Tulsa Race Massacre?
I'd have to get back to you on that.
Do you know what the Tulsa Race Massacre is?
I'd like to look into it more and get back to you on it.
Okay, so I look forward to that. How about the book Through My Eyes by Ruby Bridges, for instance?
I haven't read that.
Have you learned about Ruby Bridges?
If you have specific examples you'd like
that was a specific example.
I'll be very happy.
It was an incredibly specific example.
I named the specific questions, and I will look into it and get back to you on them.
Thank you. How about a school having a voluntary celebration for Pride Month?
Well, I think that
voluntary.
Well, let's make sure that in our schools,
this is yes or no?
We're looking. No, it's not.
Okay. How about social studies standards that teach that President Biden won the 2020 election?
I think our studies should all be taught accurately.
Yes or no?
I think our studies should be taught accurately.
The question was, do you believe that social studies standards that teach that President Biden won the 2020 election is an illegal DEI? Yes or no?
I think I have said we should teach accurately. We should.
No, you have not answered the question. I don't understand why you're incapable of answering.
I'm just not giving you the answer you want.
No, I want the answer, whatever your answer is.
I just gave you the answer.
No, the answer is yes or no.
No, the answer is
the answer is yes or no.
This wasn't education policy. It was WrestleMania for the willfully unqualified. This is what happens when you put a honky-tonk character in charge of civil rights curriculum and let the repo guy run Title I-A like a pawn shop. Linda McMahon probably woke up that morning and thought that she was going to coast through this hearing like it was another PR puff piece. Just nod, smile, dodge a few questions, and walk out untouched. But Representative Summer Lee locked in and ready to call the bluff.
Well, if African-American history is part of
certainly, but what we recognize throughout education is that a course is only 1 year or one semester. It would be impossible to teach African history and say European history at the same time. Do you not agree that it makes sense that there would be separate courses for these courses of study? It has happened throughout history. We're able to do it not just in history courses. We're able to do it with different types of literature courses or different types of music courses. One wouldn't learn about Baroque music and necessarily have to also learn about African drumming at the same time, right? We can separate those courses.
Yes, we can. And I think just as we teach U.S. history as a separate course.
Certainly. So you do not agree. So you do agree that African American cultures and African history should not be eliminated from courses, particularly AP African history.
Well, I think that African history can certainly be taught and not be considered a DEI course.
Lee was not pulling any punches. She was basically saying, you're going to learn today. And then she dropped the line that lit the fuse. I don't know what both sides of African American history would be. You could have heard a pin drop.
Proud Boys are freaking white supremacists. Neo-Nazis are too. And this president, who loves to coddle white supremacists, has decided that they should be given checks. The reasons that I pointed to those particular organizations is because you can go and read, I don't know how many articles, as Dr. Swain wants people to read up. I'm gonna be clear, I've read my fair share of books. I do have my fair share of degrees. It is clear that neo-Nazis as well as Proud Boys joined in on January 6th. Yet this slush fund that they keep talking about is specifically to give them money. So how dare this majority sit here and try to lecture this organization about money? Now, we're not talking about tax-paying dollars as we are in that slush fund. But you're telling me that $2 billion in the same country that I'm sure some of y'all would struggle with whether or not the enslavement of black people was good or bad. I'm not even gonna go there and ask y'all the question because y'all struggled with defining that these people were white supremacists. But this country still hasn't thought that reparations made sense for black folk in this country. But at the same time, they've decided that people that are in organizations that are absolutely white supremacy organizations should get our tax dollars because they decided to tear apart or attempt to tear apart our democracy. They are being rewarded. These are people that went through our criminal justice system. When people on that side of the aisle claim that they love law and order, they went through it. They either entered pleas of guilty or they were found guilty. And this president, on day one, his priority was not around racism. It was around doing things like letting them go and now putting money in their pockets. We haven't had one hearing on white supremacy. Yet when we look at things like the killing of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, the 9 worshipers who were murdered at the Mother Emanuel AME Church, the 23 people murdered in 2019 during the shooting at Walmart in El Paso, the 10 people murdered during the 2022 shooting at a grocery store in Buffalo, New York. All of these were murdered by white supremacists who are empowered by the Republican Party's racist rhetoric and policies. This is the same party that wants to drag us back to the Jim Crow era. Some say that there aren't poll taxes, and I guess it's because they're not listing the amount of money. But when you tell somebody that they've got to go and pay for something, say, like a passport that costs over $100 in order to be able to vote, that looks like a poll tax to me. Some of y'all need to read up on your history books, the very same ones that the Republicans have decided that people should not hear about because you don't want real history taught in our schools because you're afraid that it's going to hurt people's feelings to know that their ancestors were so savage that they would enslave black folk. You don't want them to understand why the 14th Amendment mattered then and it matters today. You don't want them to understand that when they draw these racist lines and tell black folk that they shouldn't have representation in this country, that it is against the Constitution. You want them to be ignorant so that they can sit up here and be your token for your mission.
Expired.
You know, this episode is bigger than Trump because presidents come and go. The deeper question is, what happens to a nation when politics becomes identity, when loyalty outweighs examination, when race remains unresolved, when history remains contested, when education becomes ideological warfare, and when some groups feel justice happened for others, but never for them. Whether you support Trump or oppose Trump, or stand somewhere in between, America is clearly wrestling with itself, and perhaps that's the real story. So continue to renew your mind. Enough said.